Young, dumb, and full of stupid ideas. I was a few months from turning 18 and I had found a two-bedroom, low-income apartment to rent. It was $375 a month, utilities included. I moved my things in and then helped my girlfriend slash fiance, Elsie, move in. Life was good, I thought. I was an adult, doing adult stuff. I had a full-time job, a girlfriend that I was going to get married to, a car, and my own place. I was living the American dream. I call her Elsie in this story. Elsie was the quote, girl of my dreams at the time. She went to parties with me. I slept over when I could. We spent as much time together as we could. It was the perfect storm. We got married in July of 2003, a year after we met. The same year, my class graduated from high school. I was working full time, plus a part time job. She was working part time as a waitress at the time, was the last time I and still was the last time I talked to her. In the planning of the wedding, she asked for my mom's address to send her an invitation. I told Elsie I didn't talk to my mom. I told her that a long time ago. And why? I didn't want to invite her, and that was that. Elsie decided she knew best and asked my dad for my mom's address and sent the invite anyways. This should have been a sign to me. One of the many red flags she put off over the 2 years we were together. The big day came. I was getting ready for the ceremony, and guests were arriving. I looked out the window and saw my mother sliding out of the car with my little sister and brother. That set my mood for the day for sure. I was not happy to see that woman's face at all. The entire day was a silent mental war between my parents. Mom would be placed for a photo and moved to the other side, as far away from Dad as possible. She would make snide comments about my extended family on my dad's side. It was miserable for me at least. Elsie seemed to be in some fantasy fairy tale land on her own all day. Later that night, after the reception, my wife and I headed to the hotel that was one of our wedding gifts. We joyfully ran up 2 flights of stairs to the third floor room. It was wrecked. My aunts and cousins had taken the liberty to decorate the room with so many balloons, streamers, blown up and wrapped condoms that it took 5 minutes to clear enough enter and enjoy a place to sit in the room. I started hauling all the other gifts we'd received up to our room. The old late 70s Buick Park Avenue Elsie owned at the time was full, back seat and trunk, with gifts for us to start our life journey. I'd finished bringing everything up as Elsie was taking the last of her wedding gown off and getting into the shower. I got excited. I took that three-piece tuxedo off faster than anyone ever had and raced into the bathroom to join her. The tub was full of water, condoms and rose petals. Balloons were still everywhere in here. That made her so mad she left the bathroom and went back and sat on the bed, stating that my family had created this mess, so I needed to clean it so she could have a nice bath. Buck naked, I started cleaning up the bathroom for us. Within the few minutes it took me to pop and dispose of the 2 or 3 dozen inflated balloons and drain the tub of rubbers and flower petals, she got bored and opened all the presents. All of them. Down to the last card, without her new groom and to enjoy them with. Now I know you all are thinking I should have turned and ran right there. You're right. It only got worse. We found out 3 days after the wedding that she was pregnant. She quit her job a week and a half later. We were struggling to keep a roof over our heads, and I was about to take on a third job. I had a friend in need. He needed to find a place to rent. I needed help with rent. I talked to Elsie about letting DB move in, and she agreed. Elsie and DB became friends faster than I expected, and it made the transition from being newlyweds with friends to newlyweds with a roommate easy enough. I worked 16 to 18 hours a day at a time. At that time, I was hoping with DB living there, it would ease the financial burden for a little while. It didn't. He ended up losing his job a few weeks after he moved in. Elsie decided she wanted to be closer to her family and farther away from my dad and small circle of friends. So we moved to Ogden, Utah, just the two of us. DB had bailed on his last month's rent after losing his job, so I didn't invite him to come with us, obviously. We rented a little two-bedroom apartment, and I found a job working at the mall, selling jewelry on the weekends after I worked 40 plus hours throwing insulation. I was already working 40 to 50 hours Monday through Friday, but I needed a little more. The rent was a little more here because Elsie wanted a nicer apartment, and with a baby on the way, things were getting tighter. We only had one car at the time, that old Park Avenue, and she was having issues with her pregnancy, so I would ride my bicycle to work. It was winter, and if she had a doctor's appointment or anything, I needed to make sure she had the car. We only had one phone, a Cricket cell phone, that she moved in with. I was still using a calling card my dad loaded up and gave me a couple years before. I didn't have a cell phone until I was almost 21, and at this point I'm still just 18. Elsie called me at work one day. She was just leaving a dentist appointment and was going into labor. I scrambled to get a hold of a manager so I could get to the hospital. Like I said, we were living in Ogden and her doctor was 40 minutes away, so she headed there immediately. Her mom was going to meet her there, so someone was with her until I could get there. I left work and jumped on the bus. I had to transfer 8 times to get to the hospital 3 or 4 hours later. She was just about to start pushing when I walked in her room and heard the doctor say, "Prepper, we need to open her up. His feet are in the birth canal." I looked at the panic on my wife's face, on her mom's face. I felt my heart rate increase as they whisked Elsie away on a gurney to the operating room. "Are you Dad?" someone asks me. "He is," her mom responded. "Where the hell have you been? She's been in labor for over 3 hours. You should have been here," she says to me. I'm speechless as the nurses and assistants rush in circles around me, dressing me in a gown and hairnets as they push me down the hall towards the operating room. When I walk in, Elsie is lying on the table, arms splayed out, anesthesiologist at the head of the table holding a gas mask. The doctor and her assistants are prepping her stomach for an incision as I approach the table. I watch in fascination as they slowly drag the gleaming blade across her stomach. Her abdominal muscles are displayed as they open her epidermis up. They slide another knife across her and expose her uterus. It looks like a smooth pink basketball. The only reason I knew this is from what the doc was saying. "I have to puke," Elsie says through the mask. I look back at her face and she turns to the side and makes a noise. Still to this day, the only way I can describe the noise is a cow that's dying, stuck in a fence. It took all I had not to laugh. I know it wasn't funny, but it was. I still laugh about it today. Her abdominal muscles were completely numb. There was no way to relieve her nausea. I'm sure she was miserable at that moment. I look back to the pink basketball. Another knife slides across flesh, and a little bulbous bottom pokes through. They wrap fingers around his tiny 3 pound, 9 ounce waist and pull all 21 inches of him free from her uterus. Another set of hands wrap a towel around his little body and snip the umbilical cord, severing the tie to his mother's womb, and rushes him out of the room. I look at the doctor in confusion. "He's not breathing properly and he needs to be incubated to stay alive. Follow her and baby. Mom will be okay here," the doc says to me. I follow the nurse to the NICU section of the hospital. All while my firstborn is lying on yet another table and being wheeled down a hall while they wipe the vernix cassioca from his thin, translucent skin. His giant bulbous head wobbles back and forth on his stick figure-like body. The wails and screams that were coming from his lungs proved he was healthy enough to survive for a while, at least. He looked so alien, literally. He was the goofiest looking newborn I'd ever seen. He was 8 weeks early, and very, very underdeveloped at that. We spent the next 4 weeks at the hospital, one of us anyways, always there by his incubator. During feeding times, we would help set up his syringe and slowly press the infant formula into a feeding tube that ran through his left nostril into his stomach. He was too frail and weak to breastfeed. I remember wondering if he would survive. What would happen if he didn't? Would his mom and I make it? We were a young couple and had our issues. We were dumb. She wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, and I wanted her to be. But I was going to put myself in an early grave, giving her the type of stay-at-home mom luxuries she wanted. I sat there staring at this child. He was so alien looking. I know this sounds really terrible, but really, he looked like a little translucent blue alien. I stared at him and wondered what came next. What was I supposed to do if he survived? I mean, I knew I was supposed to be a dad, but how? I was working a job for a company doing standard strip batting and blow-in attic insulation. It was miserable work. I was working almost 14 hours a day riding my bicycle or taking the bus if I could afford it to work 6 days a week. I needed help and asked my dad what he would suggest I do. I don't know why I asked. I already knew his answer.